Somewhere along the way, we all drift a little, but not like how you're thinking, not in a dramatic, life changing way that we usually talk about on here, but in that quiet, subtle way where one day when you're young, dumb, and influenced by all your friends, you looked at yourself and thought, when did I stop being me? Because when you're a true kid, not the mean 13-year-old that was like your alter ego. You didn't ever think about being liked. You didn't edit your personality. You didn't shrink your joy. You didn't pretend you didn't love the things you actually loved. You just existed. Loud, messy, honest, free. And then the world or your cool new friends in middle school taps you on your shoulder and says, tone it down, fit in, be normal. Don't be so weird. Don't be too different. And little by little, without even noticing, you trade pieces of yourself for approval you don't even remember asking for. By your 20s, half your decisions are shaped by what other people might think. Your clothes become more like the people you're around. Your laughter maybe becomes forced over things you don't even think are funny. Your dreams become different things than the things you actually know you want. And your authenticity becomes non existent. But then something weird and wild happens in your 30s. You start missing yourself, the real you, the kid version of you, the version who didn't care about being perfect, the one who loved things boldly and laughed embarrassingly loud or wore what she wanted and didn't apologize for taking up space. You start craving her again. You start remembering her. You start realizing she was never the problem, the world around you was. And that's what this episode is about, finding your way back, finding your quirks, back to your old humor, back to your creativity, back to your actual desires, not the ones you curated for acceptance, but truly just you. So, welcome back to Chasing Stability. And today we're talking about what it really means to come back home to yourself. Not reinvent yourself, not become a new person, but to return to the version of you that always existed beneath the expectation of the trend, the pressure, the performances. Because somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we forget that the most magnetic, most grounded, most joyful version of us was the child version. It's the one we started as, not the one we were pressured into becoming. And honestly, this whole episode was inspired by my cousin's kids, who are basically my nephews, hitting that age where everything starts to shift. They're 14 and 11 now. They're the first babies I've ever watched grow from newborns into actual little men. And watching them enter the exact stage where I remember changing, it does something to you. There's this weird ache that hits when you see someone you love standing at the doorway of the years that stole pieces of you. The years where you stopped being fully yourself and started becoming whatever the world told you was acceptable, quieter or cooler, smaller, more popular, like less too much. And I keep telling myself, I want to tell them, stop wishing away your youth. You don't understand how beautiful it is to be this unfiltered, this unafraid, and fully yourself. I know who they are right now. I know their laughs. I know their weird quirks, their confidence, the way they don't hesitate to be exactly who they are. And the hardest part is knowing that life and people, comparison, judgment, pressure will try to change them. But the plot twist to this is they're the reason that I found my way back to me, because watching them move through the world without overthinking, without shrinking, without asking permission to be excited or passionate or loud, it reminded me of the girl I used to be, the girl who didn't care what people thought, the girl who tried things just because she wanted to or because she loved them. I actually started this podcast because the younger one looked at me and said, "What is the worst thing that could happen if you do it and it fails?" And the way he said it with that like innocent confidence, I swear it cracked something open in me because kids don't overcomplicate life the way we do. They don't think about reputation or optics or perfection. They just do. Their bravery made me brave again. And then that's when it hit me. The people I changed myself for, the people I adapted to so I could fit in or be liked, they're not even in my life anymore. But the kid version of me, the original me, she's still here, waiting to be chosen. And that's really what this episode is about, coming back home to yourself, back to the version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. So, what did that look like for you? Who were you before the noise started, before opinions mattered, before the world told you to shrink, to behave, to be realistic, to fit whatever mold made other people comfortable? Because somewhere under all the layers, the expectations, the survival strategies, the versions of yourself you built just to be liked or accepted, there's still that original you, the one who didn't overthink, the one who didn't apologize for taking up space, the one who wasn't performing, who was just being. Maybe you were the kid who sang too loud, the one who drew on everything, the one who wrote stories, asked a million questions, danced in the middle of the living room for absolutely no reason. Maybe you were fearless. Maybe you were tender. Maybe you were imaginative or bold or silly or sensitive or stubborn or bright, all of the above. But you were you, unfiltered, unedited, and untouched by the world's opinions. And then life happened. People made comments. You learned to tone it down or hide it or bend yourself into shapes that didn't quite fit who you were. Not because you were wrong, but because you wanted to belong. You shifted, adapted, grew into versions that kept you safe or liked or chosen. And honestly, that's normal. That's human. That's what we all do without realizing it. But here's the beautiful part, that version of you didn't disappear. They didn't die off. They're still sitting right there underneath all the layers, waiting for you to notice them again. And what's crazy is you can usually spot your original self in the moments where you feel the most you. When you laugh so hard you cry. When you're doing something you love and forget to be self conscious about it. When someone says, "You look so happy right now." And you realize, yeah, that was the real me they just saw and they felt it too. It's wild how easy it is to lose that version of ourselves and how powerful it feels when we finally get glimpses of them again. Because that kid, they never cared about fitting in, they cared about living. And the older we get, the more we miss like that freedom mindset, right? The more we start peeling back the layers, asking ourselves, okay, who was I before the world told me who to be? And that's the beginning of coming back home to yourself. But what about when we changed in those hard teen years and throughout our 20s? That's when everything gets loud, right? That's when the world's opinions, expectations, comparisons, and unspoken rules start shaping you more than your own inner voice ever did. That's when you start trading pieces of your childhood self, not because you're like growing, but because you're surviving. Maybe you became quieter because being too expressive made someone uncomfortable. Maybe you became smaller because the world rewarded you for not taking up space. Maybe you became hyper independent because you learned early on no one was coming to save you. Maybe you became the easy one or the funny one, the responsible one, the strong one, the wild one. Not because those traits were your truth, but because they kept you safe somehow. They kept you light. They kept you chosen. You don't ever notice the exact moment it happens, though. There's no ceremony and like, no announcement to this big shift. You just wake up somewhere in like your mid to late 20s realizing you're exhausted from being the version of you the world applauded you for while quietly grieving the version of you the world never met. You stop dressing the way you want because you're afraid it says you're too much. You pick careers based on stability instead of curiosity or your love of what you want to do. You shrink opinions because you don't want to seem emotional or different. You hide hobbies because someone once laughed and judged you. You silence dreams because they sounded unrealistic around practical people. You stop being bold because someone called it weakness or made you feel like it was weak. And without ever realizing it, the self you were at 5, 10, or even 15, the self who loved without fear, created without judgment, played without shame, gets buried under these layers and layers of performance. Not because you were fake or anything like that, not because you didn't know who you were, but because adolescence and early adulthood teaches us survival long before they teach us authenticity. And the version of you that gets built in those years, they're tough and adaptable and resilient, but they're not the whole story. They're armor, not the soul. And that's why coming back to yourself in your 30s feels like both healing and this like special rebirth, because you're finally peeling off the versions of you that were made to protect you and meeting the version of you that was made to be you. So, what happens then? What snaps in us that suddenly makes that old version of ourselves magnetic again? And the answer is life gets quieter. Your friend groups thin out, sometimes by choice, sometimes by life doing the filtering for you. And when you're not surrounded by so many opinions, so many eyes, so many people to impress or keep up with, you start hearing yourself again. It's wild. You spend your teens and your 20s shaping yourself around people who don't even make it to your 30s with you. Their approval mattered, their taste mattered, their voices shaped how loud or small you allowed yourself to be. And then one day you look around and you realize they're gone. And not in like this sad way, just in a natural life moved all of us in different ways. And suddenly you're left with just you, your opinions, your preferences, your actual personality, not the one you built to survive whatever social ecosystem you were in. And once the noise stops, the childlike version of you is the first one to tap on your shoulder. Because underneath all those layers, the adapting, the performing, the maturing, the self protection, that kid never left. They were just buried under the versions you thought you needed to be. And then there's the career piece. You stop having like a job or jobs and start having more likely a career, a path, a rhythm. And the more you settle into who you're becoming, the more you start mourning who you abandoned, because stability makes space for nostalgia. And adulthood has this strange way of making you realize how much joy you traded just to feel accepted. So you start craving simplicity again, not because life is simple, but because the real you was. Because before heartbreak, before comparison, before being chosen or liked or successful ever mattered, you start craving the version of you who didn't care what they wore, who didn't overthink walking into the room, who didn't measure their worth by how productive they were that day. You crave the version of you who dreamed without fear and played without apology. And here's what I think: you don't crave that kid because you miss childhood, you crave them because you miss you. The you were before the world got loud. And honestly, the shift happens in little moments that make you realize who you used to be. It's not like you wake up at 30 and suddenly feel enlightened. It's more like one day you're just tired of shrinking or tired of performing, tired of asking, who should I be instead of who am I actually? You start noticing how draining it is to pretend you don't care about the things you actually love. how exhausting it is to dim the parts of you that other people once made fun of you for or misunderstood, how suffocating it feels to keep playing a role you never auditioned for. So you begin peeling back the layers without even trying. You start choosing comfort over approval. You start choosing authenticity over aesthetic. You start choosing peace over being impressive. And little by little, you return to the hobbies you abandoned, the music you loved before it was considered cringy, the clothes that feel like you and not like you're playing a part in a movie. You catch yourself laughing louder, caring softer, dreaming wider, almost like your inner child is whispering, "There you are. I've been waiting for you." Kind of almost like, "There you are, Peter." It's funny how the older you get, the more you realize the people you were trying to impress never even knew the real you to begin with. Some of them didn't stay long enough to even know. Some of them were too wrapped up in their own performances. Some of them only liked the version of you that made them comfortable. But with adulthood and just growing in life in general, it strips all of that away. You start craving people who see the core of you, not the curated version. You start craving experiences that feel real instead of aesthetic. And you start understanding that coming back to yourself isn't regression, it's restoration. Because the older you get, the more you realize the child version of you wasn't naive. They were free from comparison, from pressure, from performance of being someone they're not. You're not trying to be a kid again. You're just trying to reclaim the parts of yourself that growing up have overshadowed. You don't wake up one day and suddenly feel like, "Oh, wow, I'm me again." It's quieter than that. It's softer. It happens in like tiny, almost unnoticeable shifts, the kind you usually only recognize in hindsight. It starts with small rebellion, not loud, chaotic, like in your face kind of stuff, but the soft kind, the one that's like a whisper in your ear, "Hey, I remember you." It looks like picking up a hobby you used to love before anyone ever told you it wasn't cool. Suddenly you're painting again or writing again or rearranging your room like you used to all the time just because it felt good. Or wearing something because you like it, not because it will make you fit in. You throw on something that feels like your personality and don't care if it's in style. It just feels like home. Or maybe laughing the way you used to, the real laugh, the one you muted to seem cooler or calmer or whatever version you thought people preferred. Catching yourself choosing peace over performance. You stop explaining yourself so much and you stop trying to impress people who aren't even paying attention. You stop chasing spaces where you always felt slightly off. You start daydreaming again, not about accomplishments, not about aesthetics or whatever, but about possibilities, the kind of dreaming that comes from your gut and not like your ego to be something. Or maybe you start feeling a weird kind of comfort in your like own company again. You take yourself on errands or on walks or on little moments that feel like dates with your own soul. You're not lonely, you're becoming yourself again, realizing you don't crave the same validation anymore. There's a moment where someone's opinion, someone you used to bend over backwards for, just doesn't hit the same way anymore. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened back into someone who knows her own voice and doesn't need approval. Or maybe it's becoming more curious than critical. Instead of tearing yourself apart, you start asking, "Why did I react that way? What do I actually want? What version of me made this choice? The scared one or the real one?" That's the shift. You stop focusing on others and turn it to you and learning how you respond to life and how you actually want to respond. The curiosity is the breadcrumb trail. It leads you back to yourself piece by piece, or feeling this sudden random urge to do things you haven't done since you were a kid. Roll down the window, dance in your kitchen, color in a coloring book, rewatch the movie you were obsessed with when you were 12. It's not regression. it's reconnection. And here's the biggest sign of all that you're stepping back into yourself. You start grieving the version of you that you abandoned and loving her at the same time. There's this tenderness that shows up, a softness. You look back at all the identities you wore like armor. Instead of cringing, you feel compassion. You realize every version served a purpose, but only one was truly you. Coming back to yourself isn't a comeback story. It's just remembering who you were before the world told you how to be, remembering what lit you up before anyone taught you shame, remembering what you enjoyed before you started measuring everything by whether you were good at it or if it was cool. When these signs start showing up, you don't just feel different, you feel familiar again. Like you're finally walking towards someone you haven't seen in years, and she's just been waiting for you this whole time. There's something almost sacred about the moment you realize you're finally coming back to yourself. Like recognizing a smell from your childhood or hearing a song you forgot you knew every word to. Because returning to yourself isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering someone old, someone original, someone you didn't have to think about being. You just were. Coming back to yourself feels like home because you're returning to a version of you that existed before fear or before comparison, before the world started telling you who you were supposed to be. It's the first time in a long time you make a choice and instantly think, oh, that truly felt like me. It's wearing something because you like it, not because you're trying to fit like the mood board from your Pinterest. It's saying no without rehearsing it 10,000 times because you're scared to hurt someone's feelings. It's laughing in the way that feels a little too loud, but also a little too honest. It's reconnecting with your favorite things, old hobbies, old dreams, old joys, and realizing they never stopped belonging to you. Coming home to yourself is peaceful in a way you didn't expect because so much of your teen years and early 20s are spent performing for approval, for belonging, for survival, for identity. But when you start shedding all of that, the relief is almost physical. It's like loosening a tight ponytail you didn't even realize was hurting your head. You stop negotiating your personality. You stop shrinking to make other people comfortable. You stop abandoning parts of yourself just to be chosen. And maybe you stop mistaking being easy to love for being worthy of love. Returning feels like home because it's the first time in a while you've lived in a version of yourself that isn't edited. It's the first time you trust your own voice more than the noise around you. It's the first time you look in the mirror and think, wait, I actually like this person. And maybe that's what we've been chasing this whole time. Not reinvention, not perfection, not applause, but reunion. Reunion with the kid who used to dream loudly. Reunion with the teenager who cared too much because she loved too deeply. Reunion with the young adult who made mistakes but was trying her absolute hardest. Reunion with the parts of you that were never broken, just buried and tucked away. Coming back to yourself feels like home because finally, after all the versions you tried on, after all the identities you had to grow out of, after all the noise you had to silence, you made your way back to the one person who was always meant to stay, you. So let me tell you some things that I thought about since I realized I was making my way back to who I was in youth and finally coming back to who I was after all the growth and mistakes I made along the way. The first one is you're not starting over, you're returning. There's a huge difference here. Starting over feels like erasing everything you've been. Returning feels like reclaiming everything you lost along the way. The spark, the curiosity, the pieces of you that were never meant to disappear, but you had let them drift for a while. You know what I mean? And number two, nothing you loved as a kid was random. Those tiny obsessions, those weird talents, the things that you could talk about for hours, they were early cues about who you really are. Some of them you abandoned to fit in, some of them you muted to move like on through life, but none of them are gone. Get them back. They bring a joy that is like so unmatched. Number 3, you don't need permission to begin again. Not from your family, not from your friends, not from the version of you who thought she needed to have everything figured out by, 25. Who you are becoming does not answer to who you were performing as before. Get it? Number 4, confidence doesn't come from reinvention. It comes from remembering. When you stop forcing yourself to be someone you never naturally were, your confidence comes back in ways you don't expect. Not loud or performative, but stable. I used to act like I didn't care about anything, and it was when I was the most insecure in my whole life. Now I show that I care again and that I do have a gentle heart, and my confidence has stepped back into the room. Feels nice. Number 5, returning to yourself is not regression, it's alignment. It's shedding the adult anxieties that never belonged to you in the first place. Those are probably going to still be around, right? But it's choosing honesty over aesthetic, it's choosing joy over performance. Number 6, not everyone will understand this version of you. And that's how you'll know you're getting closer. Some people like the version of you that bent or adapted or overgave. People like people that don't make them look at themselves too hard. But the people who love the real you will feel like relief, not resistance. They open the door for you to be even more like your true self. Number 7, you're not late. There is no timeline for coming home to yourself. I mean, a lot of people never do it, honestly. So the fact that you are even like curious about it in any way already puts you ahead of who you were yesterday. Coming back to yourself isn't this dramatic movie moment. There's no montage where you suddenly wake up healed and glowing and journaling on a cliff somewhere about how you're you again and it was all so worth it and so perfect. It happens slowly. It happens in the little ways when you find yourself being vocal about being someone no one else is. When you pick up an old hobby, when you light up talking about something that you love again, when you stop shrinking to fit the room that you really didn't even want to be in anyway, when you realize you're building a life that doesn't need an audience to feel real. It happens every time you choose authenticity over approval and peace over performance and joy over judgment. How many times have I said that? Please remember it, because returning to yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to someone familiar. It's about honoring the kid who trusted you with their dreams. It's about forgiving the teenager who thought she had to change to survive. It's about thanking the 20 something who tried so hard to be chosen and realizing all she ever wanted was to be loved by herself. And it's about embracing the woman you are now, the one who finally gets to choose who she really is inside. So, if you're in that place where you're starting to feel the shift, where old pieces of you are tapping you on the shoulder saying, "Hey, remember me?" Let me just say this, okay? I hope you don't ignore it. Go follow it, lean into it, let it rearrange you in the most beautiful ways possible. Because the real you that existed before the outside world stepped in, she never left. She was just waiting for the space you're finally giving her now. And that's what it means to come back to yourself. Not perfection, not this big, look at me, just permission to be who you always were. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if it felt like a hug you didn't know you needed, send it to someone who's trying to find their way back to themselves too. Your childhood self would want you to share all the goofy, weird things that make you you. Okay. So don't gatekeep all of it from the people that love you. Let them see it, let them share in it. You don't know, they might be weird and waiting for you to be. But also make sure you're following Chasing Stability wherever you're listening right now and also on social medias too, so you don't miss anything. All right, people, I love you all. I am so proud of you, and I hope you find your inner child today or sooner rather than later. This is Chasing Stability, and I'll meet you in the in between next Tuesday.